Our next moderator is going to be talking about thinking big. Her name is Adrian Ott, and this woman is phenomenal. I had a chance to talk with her a bit last night. She is on the WITI advisory board and spent 15 years in corporate America before, well, deciding that she was going to completely leave, start her own business, began Exponential Edge. So she works with relentless visionary executives, as she likes to put it, on their go-to-market and alliance strategies. She's also an award-winning author of the 24-hour Customer, and it was named the best business book of the year in 2011 by USA Book News, Library Journal, and Small Business Trends. And I hear that it's also on Stanford Business School's list for recommended reading. So pretty impressive there. So let's welcome our moderator, Adrian Ott.
Good morning, everybody. Why don't you guys come on? Good morning, everybody. I'm just going to get set up here. Thank you, Amanda, for that wonderful introduction. We're just going to get a little bit organized here. How have you been enjoying the conference so far? Isn't this fantastic? Oh, it's just wonderful. As Amanda mentioned, I'm Adrian Ott. I'm the mugshot on the left. No, that's not Betty Crocker. That's me. And I can't bake, but I can whip up a mean martini. So talk to me about that at the reception this afternoon. So I wanted to talk a little bit. I'm going to introduce our panelists in a moment, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the WITI Hall of Fame last night. Wasn't that a fabulous, fabulous event? I have to say, I've attended these events over several years, and these women just continue to inspire me. They're just amazing, amazing women, as are all of you are amazing women. I just am so fascinated by all the different personalities that I meet here and all the genuine ideas and strength that you bring to WITI and to your profession. The thing that struck me at the Hall of Fame, what I loved was listening to the testimonials from the CEOs, the subordinates, the peers, and also as well as their colleagues. What captured my attention were the adjectives that people used to describe these women. I heard persistent. What else did we hear? We heard creative. We heard fearless. The one that captured my imagination was bold. Bold. And that came out of a CEO's mouth. Wasn't that amazing? I just think bold is such a fabulous adjective. When I think of bold, I think of Star Trek. You know, to boldly go where no one has gone before. And yet, when you start to think about what these women are doing and the crux of thinking big, that is exactly what you're doing when you're thinking big. You're doing something that no one has ever done before. You are boldly going where no one has gone. Now, you're not going to die and you're not going to get attacked by aliens, but we tend to get fearful. We not only like to think big, but we have to tell people about this. How many of you have had an idea, but we're kind of nervous about telling other people about it? How many of you, let's see a show of hands, how many of you have had some ideas and it's kind of scary? It's pretty scary. Your reputation is on the line. You're worried about what people are going to say about you. And what actually struck me is when I started writing my book, I got all the way through writing the book and I started to get really cold feet. Because I had a concept, and there's a concept in my book called timographics. Now, if you can think of demographics and psychographics, I have a concept called timographics. It's about how time affects people's behavior and what businesses can do about it and use that. And this is an idea that no one had thought about before. And I had a model in my book that had never been published before. And yet I had these cold feet. I thought, my God, HarperCollins is going to take my book and tell the world. They're going to translate it into many languages. And I was like, what if I'm wrong? What if What if all this work I've been putting into is not right? Or what if someone misinterprets? I'm not there as I am in a peer meeting where I can correct somebody. They may misinterpret what I'm reading. This is going to go all over the world. But what helped me was I surrounded myself with, before I put the book, submitted the book into HarperCollins, I surrounded myself, and this is something I've done throughout my career, and you can do even with your own peer groups. Surrounded myself with what I called friendly critics. These were people that I respected and trusted to really take a good, hard look at what I was writing about and the models that I was proposing. And what I said to them was, please, please, tell me the truth. Tell me where this is not resonating with you. Tell me what is not working and where this needs improvement. Because the last thing I want is the New York Times telling me I'm wrong. And the same goes for your workplace. You don't want your bosses, your senior executives saying that what you have is wrong. So it helps to have a circle of critics that are very honest with you. And to me, that's being a friend. And to me, but you got to make sure you have people that you really know and you trust their opinion. So with that, today we are talking about thinking big. And some of you may be wondering, well, why do we need to think big? We've talked about the last 2 days, but I've got a busy job. I work 9 to 5. Well, one of the reasons we need to think big is there was a Harvard study, and there we go. There's a Harvard study that was published in the Harvard Business Review. Actually, it was done by INSEAD in 2009. And they found that senior executive women, when they did 360-degree surveys, were rated on par with men, with the exception of one element. And that was in terms of being visionary. And I don't believe it for a moment that these women weren't visionary. I think that it's a misperception. And some of the reasons that they cited were lack of buy-in. Some of the women felt that, the CEO's running around stating all these visions that we can't execute on. But yet, how many CEOs do you see out there that say, hey, we're going to do the same thing for the next 10 years that we did in the last 10 years? That would go over like a lead balloon, wouldn't it? If you said that in a job interview, would you get the job? Heck no. So you've got to think big. They're asking, especially in today's economy, we're asking executives, senior executives, and even individual contributors to think big, think beyond, because things are moving too quickly. We talked about the lack of confidence, getting your confidence up, and that's been a theme throughout the conference for the past couple of days. The last area is lack of credit. Now, how many of you have had a situation where someone has taken credit for your work or your ideas? It hurts, huh? It really hurts. I had that happen my first job when I started working at a tech company. This guy who was peripherally involved in the project made a point of going to the senior executives, even though he had nothing to do with it, and taking full credit for the work that me and my team were doing. It hurts, but it was a great lesson, because not only do you need to speak, I heard one of the speakers last night talking about you need to speak, you need to publish. It's publish or perish. And I don't mean you have to write at Fast Company like I do. Well, you don't have to go public outside your company, but publishing PowerPoints, publishing reports within your company, sharing those ideas with your management. That's publishing. Because guess what? What happens when someone tries to take your idea and you've published something? They think they're a copycat, because you can document and you can show this was my idea. Here's my analysis on this, right? So it's really, really important, whether it's graphics on a PowerPoint slide or writing an article or something within your organization, really documenting those ideas is really important. So what we're going to talk about today is how do you start to think big, but how do you also communicate big? Because that's the other thing these women did very well. They overcame the challenge and the fear of getting their ideas out there. And this is something that really you can put in your toolkit. This is not something where you have to be innately talented at. This is something you can develop as a skill. And you don't have to write a book to be recognized as a thought leader in your area. Believe me, it's a lot of work. I wouldn't recommend it for everybody. But there are things you can do, and today we're going to talk about strategic partnerships as one element in your toolkit that you can bring. And I can say from my own experience, when I started using some of these tools and this recipe book, when I was in corporate America, my career shot forward because people started to recognize my ideas. Now, I wanted to also demonstrate another woman. You may say, okay, who is another woman who has really taken advantage of strategic alliances and partnerships? Joanne Moretti is a CMO at a Fortune 50 tech company, and she heads up their software group. She had rapidly moved throughout her career. One of the things that she did is she tangibly communicated her ideas using some of the tools we're going to talk about today. She used partnering. One of the other things that she did is she was very good at translating an initiative that she was defining for her group or her organization to the KPIs or key performance indicators of her executives. She could say, okay, if we do this, this is what this is going to mean in terms of increased growth, increased market share, or increased profit, for example. But she really tuned into that and she made those translations and put that in. That's speaking executive language, and that's what executives notice. The other thing that executives notice is she placed some bets on some partners. She went ahead and said, okay, we're going to focus on a few partners on this go-to-market strategy instead of peanut buttering all over the world. What happened is she doubled the business in 3 years. Doubled the business in 3 years. If that doesn't get executive attention, I don't know what does. So ultimately, she had rapid career advancement. Now, some of you may be wondering, okay, what are these tools? What exactly are we talking about when we're saying strategic partnering? And today I have invited, and the WITI group has invited several representatives from the Association of Strategic Alliance Professionals. And if you're not familiar with this organization, it's an organization, in addition to WITI, that I'm also a part of. And it's a wonderful organization that is recognized throughout the world for business collaboration. So they actually provide certifications and all kinds of really good things to help people learn how to build business-to-business partnerships. And so on the panel, we have John Soper, who is the senior consultant and also the managing director of New Paradigms Group. He also serves as the immediate past president of ASAP. ASAP's the short term for Association of Strategic Alliance Professionals. He is ASAP's Silicon Valley immediate past president. We have Norma Watenpaugh. Norma is on the board of ASAP. She also has served as the best practices chair, and her day job is that she is the principal of Phoenix Consulting, who provides business collaboration services. Lastly, we have Nimma Bakshi. Nimma is president of ASAP Silicon Valley here. And Nimma has been recognized throughout the world and also recognized in books for his work in professional services for the last 20 years in building strategic alliances, partnerships, new ventures, and business models. So join me in welcoming our panel. So I thought what we would do to kick this off, some of you may be wondering, okay, we need to level set. What exactly are we talking about when we talk about strategic partnering? So I've asked John to go ahead and describe that. And would you like me to forward the slide?
Sure.
Okay.
But I'll be referring to it in a minute. Good morning, all, and thank you for joining us in this conversation. At the awards dinner last night and in the discussion about Joanne's career, I think those are two, we've seen a number of examples in those two areas of how developing strategic alliances can be a game changer for your company and for your career. It's one way of thinking big and advancing your career. Not the only way, but a very powerful way. So we wanted to touch on some of the components of kind of a recipe book, as much as we can do in this brief period of time, of how you approach developing strategic alliances. For those who are interested in looking at this and pursuing it or understanding what others are doing, it's a key area. So let me address one of the first pieces, which are what are the kinds of alliances that you might form. There are many flavors, and one size does not at all fit all. There are many ways to go about this, many flavors, and I think one of the keys is that you have the answer to what you do in terms of structuring a relationship to meet the objectives of your company is very dependent on what you want to meet the objectives of your company. Now, contrast this to a salesperson who is constrained by, to some extent or a large extent, by the product line, the sales, sales collateral, the price list, the discounting authority that he or she has, and so forth. You, as someone developing an alliance, are not so constrained. Let's just assume for the moment that you have the full authority of your company and that you're an excellent negotiator. Once you've decided what kind of company you want to ally with, and there will be many, but once you've decided a particular target, you have the full resources of your company. That's kind of your black sales bag, if you will, but it's all the assets, all the value components in your company that you may want to exchange or build collaborative value on with another company. So it's a very creative process, and the choice is yours. That is one of the key ideas. That's assuming you're a very good negotiator. Two very quick examples that are familiar to all of you, I'm sure, in the room. One, think of the iPod. Without the multiple relationships that were developed with content providers and other providers and working through iTunes and all the other pieces that made that ecosystem work, the iPod would be simply a disc that fit in your hand and stored all your CDs. Well, that's actually what it started out to be, and it was cool, but not nearly as cool as when they added all these relationships and the ecosystem around it. Similarly, the iPhone started out as something that was basically a phone with an iPod and some internet connectivity, and not much more. It wasn't until, it was cool, it was great industrial design, but it wasn't until the ecosystem of applications developed around it that it really took off. Now, the point of mentioning that is that these weren't ideas carved in stone. These weren't, pick model A, pick model B, and fit that together. These were very value-creating ideas that were developed not just by Steve Jobs, but by many of the other people that he worked with. And so he was unbounded, except within the constraints of the company, in being creative and developing a very high-value new product with these ecosystems. So if you take nothing away from what we talk about today, other than this is a place that you can be highly creative in and growing your company and moving it forward and growing your career, this is one of those ideas, the creativity. That's a big idea, and it's a place for you to find big ideas. Now, having said that, you're not exactly out in the woods without a compass. There are industry standard models, some of them on the slide up here, and we have very little time, but just very quickly, let me talk about some of the models of ways of thinking about different types of relationships. Think of along a couple of continua. One, think of a continuum going from very tactical, the very transactional at one pole, to the other, to being very value creative, being very synergistic and very collaborative. And there are relationship models that can be beneficial that fit both poles, and many that are in between. So that's one dimension in which to think about relationships. Another is to think about the components, as I was discussing before, within your company, the value points that you want to exchange, have transactions on, or collaborate on with other companies. And that may involve cash, it may involve access to markets, it may involve channels, it may involve product development, it may involve very expansive joining teams in bringing your joint knowledge together in a collaborative fashion. So a couple of examples of ways in which people have formed models of relationships, and I'll go through these very quickly in the interest of time. But you can think on one end of the continuum of something like an outsourcing agreement, which is a very transactional cash, and maybe you get some economic value out of it. Moving perhaps towards a joint marketing agreement where you have a more collaborative way of looking at a joint value proposition between your two companies and how you're going to go to market. Going a little further along the strategic and collaborative end of the spectrum, you might start looking at VAR, or value-added reseller relationships, OEMs, which have many of the market access components, but also have some technology integration components to it and service integration, as well as some potential financial leverage. From there, you may look at product development ideas, joint product development, joint engineering, full collaboration on doing research as well as development. Those are just a few of the models, and many of them are hybrids that you'll end up with. So it's there's a vast array of things that you can do. The point is, going back to my initial point, this is a very creative process. And
Thank you,
that's
John.
where you can find your big ideas.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. That's a really good overview. I think if I understand what you're saying correctly, and my understanding of it, the real difference here is that we're talking about strategic value creation as opposed to a transaction of just spending money. So, and that's the stuff that executives really resonate with. They're trying to understand, how do we create more value? And what you're doing is, by using these concepts, you can actually create more value for your company and get noticed for doing that. Thank you, John. I'm going to go ahead and, in the interest of time, move ahead to Norma, who is going to talk a little bit about how do we get buy-in for some of these ideas. So if you come up with the concept, what are some tactics? What are some techniques that can be used to get people to buy into your idea?
Sure, I'd be happy to. One of the challenges in alliance management is that typically we don't have a lot of organizational power. We don't have a lot of hierarchical authority. We have to do everything through influence by managing the alignment, if you will, of people's motivations, their aspirations, their incentives to the big picture, the big idea, the big value-creating objective of the alliance. So that becomes a very quite arduous task sometimes. I'll ask alliance managers how much time they spend on internal alliance management, getting the internal players aligned. And there's a lot of touch points there, as John talked about the different types of alliances and the parts of the organization they touch. It can go across the entire organization. It can touch executives. It can touch individuals who are in engineering or marketing or sales. A lot of touch points, a lot of different, perhaps even conflicting motivations and incentives. So how do you get all of this aligned and going in the same direction? Well, when you look at the chart here, you see a lot of colorful names. So this is one way of laying out what is the landscape, what is the work ahead of you, and trying to manage that alignment. So you see on kind of the room of technical people, so you know X and Y axis is right. So, but on the horizontal, you see commitment. Commitment is, do they believe? Do they understand that big picture? Do they support it? Do they understand the value it's creating for the company? The vertical axis is accountability. That's what's at stake for each individual. Is it a career-making initiative or career-ending one? Do you have an MBO based on it? Do you have a bonus that's at stake? Did your boss tell you you have to do it? And you can also find in times that some of the people might have a negative stake. They get a benefit if you fail. So it's really important as you start out on this at the very beginning, you know, selling your ideas, to understand where people are. And if you don't know where they are, you need to have that conversation. And that conversation itself will go a long ways toward building trust and alignment and understanding how you can work with people to create a more win-win outcome. Now, I loved Amy's opening story this morning when she talked about the OPI Alliance with Ford. Is Amy still here? Okay, I would love to hear about the snipers and hostages in her world. When she brought up that idea. I'm sure there's a good one in there. So, you know, simply put, you know, commitment is hearts and minds, accountability is their necks and butts, and trying to get this all aligned into a cohesive picture. And you have to have those conversations, and they have to be authentic. They have to be real. If you come across manipulative or, you know, giving them the third degree, you're going to do yourself a world of hurt, because that's disrespectful. So, and I think that's something that, you know, we as women have kind of maybe an edge up on, because we have some of those skills. But you have to look at the chart, you know, when you get this mapped out. And who are the champions who can help you? Who are going to forward your cause? Who are the cheerleaders who are going to be, again, amplifying your message? So building that buy-in. Then you're going to have snipers and hostages. How do you deal with those folks? Well, there's a couple of ways. First of all, that conversation. Sometimes people just want to be able to attach to something big, be part of something bigger than they are. So if they understand what that vision is and why it's of value to the company or why it's going to save the world, why it's going to benefit them, if you can make those connections, that'll move them over the line. Other people need that, but they also need the more personal, what's in it for me, WIIFM, the famous East Coast radio station. So you have to be able to relate, you know, their personal motivations. Now, if I can give an example, then I'll let others kind of comment on, you know, their experiences here. But one example is an alliance manager I work with, technology company partnering with another, had a very troublesome sniper in his community, and he needed to be able to, sometimes you need to change their attitudes, change their behavior, or you need to ask him to contribute elsewhere. So he talked to this person and discovered that they thought of themselves as a thought leader in technology, that they were an evangelist of innovation. And being able to understand that and connect that with the innovative capacity, that value-creating capacity of the alliance, he moved that person from a sniper to a cheerleader. Go on the next step, that person, he started targeting and driving that person into situations where he could talk about that innovation capacity. Gave him some personal accountability and investment in that alliance, and moved him up to a champion. So he moved him not only from something that was distracting the progress to someone who was actually forwarding the progress and having a positive influence on those people still on the left-hand side of the chart. So that's one example.
That's a great analysis. Can I interject?
Yeah, go
a
ahead.
quick comment? So, having been the target of many a sniper in my day,
We all have
one of the
scars.
things that, so one of the best things you can do is what you said, which is to empower them and bring them on the team. That's not always possible, though. Sometimes you need to work through outside of the organization structure in some cases to find those champions and cheerleaders who are already there to build consensus with them and basically outweigh the negative effects of the snipers. So there's a number of ways to go about that.
You get kind of a bandwagon effect where everyone is, you know, you reach a tipping point where things are going in a different direction, there's a positive outcome. It kind of neutralizes the snipers. They're not empowered to be as destructive because there's a forward momentum going.
Yeah,
And including people in a creative process, people support what they create. So drawing them into that co-creation process, you know, will put them on your side.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful example, and I think the transitioning from the snipers to becoming part of your community is really part of what mitigates the risk that we talked about, some of that risk of what's going out, because it's not about you, it's about your ideas. So, and it's about having everyone contribute to that idea and improve that idea, right? Mm-hmm. So they become part of it, and so it really becomes less scary to go out with that because you have people vetting it for you. In the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and shift, and some of you may be wondering a little bit, what are some of the tools? How can we start to think about that? And then we'll come back to some of these topics in our Q&A. Nimma, you have brought some information about what are some of the tools? How do we start to kind of think about this? We talked about what are alliances, we talked about how do we sell our ideas, but how can we start to maybe think about some tools? What?
Yeah, sure. So there's a lot of words on that page.
Don't get scared. It's actually simpler than you think.
So I'm going to talk about method, and this is a method that any single person can use and use starting today. So co-creation, I think if you're in the tech industry, you hear a lot about co-creation. And like anything, using John's terminology around the iPod, co-creation has its own versions as well. Co-creation in its first rendition was the Starbucks story about customer inclusion in the experience of the transaction. The second rendition of co-creation was where the C-suite began to look at big business areas and began to intermingle parts of their own business model or other partner business models to create net new value. The third stage of co-creation is about you. It is the personification where each individual is able to, with the notion of business growth, with the notion of innovation to do things better, is now a co-creator, a curator of co-creation. So the way the slide reads is this: co-creation with your industry and ecosystem to accelerate innovation. Read that as business innovation, typically growth in this era. Why? If you look at what's underneath that, the reason ideas matter, the reason vision matters, gender is not relevant in this. It matters because virtually every single industry is undergoing change. As I spend time with the C-suite in each of these industries, each and every one of them says status quo is over. And I'm going to get to how you get to what's on the other side if it's over. So in the healthcare industry, and I'm going to walk through an example in a couple minutes on this one, the advent of the health information exchanges, the notion that we will change how we deal with health. We will not stop calling it, we will not do the tests and wait till we're sick. We will take control of it as persons go around wellness. Wellness is a massive industry in its own growth mode. Wellness is looking for business leaders who can give pathways on how you create wellness at all demographic stages of life. Think of that as net new leadership roles, all empty right now. And women are very good at exemplifying through personal example how to achieve that outcome. And businesses are organizing around it. The telcos, I think with AT&T, you see, if those of you have AT&T as a carrier, they're no longer branding themselves on uptime, as the tech industry might have done in bits and bytes. They're branding themselves on something, again, John talked about, which was the application ecosystem. They are the platform. They are your source for a digital life. They are your source of functionality. That takes people. That takes people who can create experiences, who can put together clusters of applications and say, this is how a user would accomplish a benefit in their life. AT&T is spending a lot of money, and they're looking for a lot of people who can fulfill those types of leadership roles. Retail. Retail, this is funny. And there's some irony in this, that the retailer, for as long as we can remember, wanted to get you in the store, captivate you. Now, with the advent of the smartphone and other form factors that are coming out behind it, the retailer is not only in competition with what you can look at other retailers while you're in the store, they now need to compete with themselves. Their online channel needs to be the destination you want to go to versus what you see before you versus the other retailers. How do you compete with yourself? And how does that co-opetition, how is that exemplified? So my main point now is you can see every industry is under massive change. So business executives, technology executives, those in product development, they need a way, they need a method, the method to vision. So when Adrian opened up with women through the HBR and INSEAD study were not perceived as being visionary, not true. It had to do with the factors she cited around creating buy-in, around putting a business construct around it where risk could be assessed. And so this is what I'm going to get into here. The co-creation wheel is something that through the last couple decades I have been able to explore, usually in the context of building partnerships or running ventures. But here's how it plays through. You start with phase one, which is strategy, structure, and options, meaning that you're going to bring different stakeholders together. They could be internal to your organization, they could be external, they could be both. And you're going to, the business term is cross-map priorities. And you're going to cross-map the priorities to begin to figure out what scope that you want to co-create around. A lot of people are interested in today's world with this much change going on in intermingling. So it's not like it's hard to get stakeholders together. You get a heat map. Again, I'm using business terminology because once you put it into business terminology, you can organize people around you. As Norma was talking about, you can take people who might be snipers and they can either be neutralized or they can become cheerleaders or indeed they can become part of your team. I call it puzzle piece. You know, you puzzle pieces together. It's in your control what stakeholders get together. Particularly in the digital world, it's very easy to organize different parties around a work orientation. So once you put it into strategy, structure, and options, the rest of it is where I think women can excel at. Women are very strong in experiential learning. And I won't go into every one of what's in the inner circles there, but the second stage is experiential learning. It is trialing, incubating, learning, exposing. And the third one is around branding and institutionalization. Nyla for Merchant talks about the new how. I think that is a great reference for where you can begin to see how do you institutionalize something that's working, something that is jointly owned with other stakeholders in your organization or partner organizations. And then the fourth, and this is one where I think there's new ways to do this with digital platforms, is you create community and you evangelize. And you know you're creating community when your community is telling you what's next, what we can do next. If you don't get the what's next from your community, they're not a community. So I want to close with your role. Your role is that of a conduit. You set a business-based goal agenda. You organize the stakeholders. It's your creativity and who you want to bring together. It could be industry-oriented, it could be business process-oriented, etc. You are the steward of what the how is. So that's where the collaborative business planning techniques and other things like that are important to have at your disposal. Every one of our organizations has them now. You've got to find them. You foster ownership. And this is where I think the old way, I'll call it the conglomerate, the industrial age, is finished. Fostering ownership is much more human. It's much more inclusive. It's consensus leadership, as Meg Whitman calls it. And it's, in my world, in my view, it's imperative to long-term success, long-term innovation. And you engage the users, and you tell them their role. Their role is to be not only your customer, potentially, as a user, but to be your advisor. The co-creation system, they're going to envision, not vision, but envision. And once they envision, you are perceived as the visionary steward. They are going to create experiences. So in the work I do, I tell people, not products, experiences. It's no longer black box finished. It's all about exposure and allowing that transparency to engage your stakeholder group, your end customer, and maybe the whole value constellation. They brand. No single person brands, other than maybe Steve Jobs, but they brand. In today's world, you brand collectively. You evangelize collectively. And then once you have the business agreements in place, as partnerships go, you begin to monetize. So I hope that helps give a method by which you can take control of co-creation and achieve business innovation as soon as you want.
Great, thank you, Nimma. And as you can see, what we're talking about today is an overview. There's a lot more information that can be gathered and pulled together, and we just really wanted to give you a flavor of some of the things that people in partnering think about day in, day out. And it's a big method, and it's something that's becoming much more inclusive. I'm going to open the floor up to Q&A, and as we're lining up someone for Q&A, I'd like to first I'm going to throw up some of the takeaways of some of the things we've talked about so far to get you thinking. But I also, there's a number of people here in the room that are in IT. And Nimma, I know you and I were talking about the role of partnerships in IT, and you may be wondering, okay, well, that's real good if you're in marketing, or it's real good if you're in R&D, but how does that play into IT? And we really discussed that there's going to be a big trend here. Could you maybe talk about that a little bit?
The role of IT in partnering? Or?
Yeah, how partnering is going to play in IT as the cloud emerges and the line of businesses.
So let's see if I'm hitting the thread as you wish. One might have thought of business and IT as separate, and they are inseparable. Even more, and the way they're inseparable in IT and in partnerships is how you partner is now had to elevate its game too. The use of cloud has allowed parties to collaborate with speed, with highly mingled intellectual property that can be shared together, and then it can engender the co-creation part. But one must use the technology platforms available if your partnership is going to separate from the many, many other partnerships out there. It is an execution-oriented imperative.
Right. Okay. So are there any questions? Are we going to bring the mic? I think Carolyn has a question here.
So first of all, thank you. I'm so enjoying this topic because understanding how to create alliances and partnerships are so central and critical to every job in every business at all kinds of levels. So my question is, as an organization, do you provide the tools, because I'm thinking about partnerships I might want to form for WITI or my other company, and do I have to start from ground zero, or do you have samples of, for example, partnership agreements
Yes.
that are available? You do?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that this is the benefit of 2013 versus, say, 1998.
Right.
And I often think it's in one's organization. However, yes, there are templates for virtually all of the things you'd want to accomplish around partnering and partnering for a business outcome, whether it's top-line oriented, whether it's cost rationalization oriented, whether it's operational synergy oriented. And the other benefit in terms of WITI or ASAP is the network of people who've done it is particularly in the technology sector is right here. One thing I'll comment on, if one chooses co-creation as an area to develop themselves and think big and create bigness around you, the Venkat Ramaswamy and Francis Gouliard have been and C.K. Prahalad have been the ones who have defined the entire domain. And they too have templates and frameworks, and there's a lot of compatibility with what you saw here.
I'd like to put in a pitch for ASAP here because I just completed a year-and-a-half project of consolidating the best practices in alliance management into a single handbook. And this was drawn from about 30 to 40 different alliance managers across industries, across technologies, and worldwide. And it's the ASAP Handbook of Alliance Management. And it is a how-to, or what to think about, and there is a mass of tools and templates and processes in there that can lead you through, either a very, very large global alliance, or you can scale it down to manage a very small personal alliance.
And how do we get a copy of that handbook?
It's purchasable from the website.
Excellent. And what about
And
business model?
What is the website, Norma?
www.strategic-alliances.org.
Okay, www.strategic-alliances.
Strategic-alliances.
Strategic-alliances.org. Got it.
And
I
I
would
just
also
have one
mention
more.
that we have workshops that also cover the material that's in Norma's book.
Online
We have panel presentations and thought leadership ideas. We have mentor programs, so we have a lot of resources, and so stop up and see us afterwards. We'll be glad to introduce you.
Definitely. Just one quick question. Also, do you have any material on business models, which is hard to find?
I think there's some of that in the handbook. There's probably more in the resource library.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions? We have someone. I just wanted to comment while we're waiting for the Q&A. One of the things also, some of you may be saying, well, what if my idea isn't exactly right? There are times when your ideas, the timing's wrong, or there's something going on in the other part of the organization you don't know about. Don't worry about it. As long as it's a reasonable idea, people are still going to go, wow, she's got great ideas. I'm going to bring her and invite her to my next meeting. So bear that in mind. Nobody bets 1,000 in the idea business. And so the more you get up there to bat, the higher batting average you're going to have, and the more you're going to be called upon in your organization. So yes, we have a question in the back.
Hi, I'm Kelly Gizzi. I'm from Intel. We have a lot of online communities. We have, social media. There are a lot of us that believe in the new how. We want to take more input from users because we are removed. So we do value that. We do run into, and I was hoping for some advice on when this content you bring up from users or from these alternative places clash with the big corporate command control, but we paid an agency $2 million for this plan. Why is this input better? How do you break through and try to make those alliances, users kind of win?
Let's make this dialogue. You start small, and the term is build business momentum on this, and it starts with something that Adrian opened up with earlier. Is how does that idea make business impact theoretically? And so you're leading yourself into a business case, and in Norma's slide, you're leading yourself into saying who might be the cheerleaders that would support that business case. Organizations are particularly at the size of Intel, they have pretty much paid everybody to do everything somewhere, and it's so that's normal. But if you build a small consensus, number one, you're moving forward. Number two, you're orienting yourself to a business case. And one thing businesses do respond to is, I'm going to give you a second option. It's not like I'm trying to supersede the way we do it, the policy. I'm going to give you a second option. I think, again, to the point of experiences, if you can show the current state experience and possible differences in experience, and what that might mean to a stakeholder in your organization or outside, then it's in the world of change, you probably have something there. The last thing I'll say about this is think like an entrepreneur in a big organization. A lot of times you can have a startup venture, a startup operation for a fiscal year, to prove it out, take a tiger team to prove it out, and all you're saying is that's all I want to do is I want to flesh it out and see if this business case can hold water. Very often that builds that momentum, and you begin to find one or more in the C-suite that would say, yeah, I think we ought to have a second option. Again, I think Amy said it well. You want to manipulate the situation, use time to your advantage to get there.
Thank you, Nimma. I know we're running up against our time frame, and if you have other questions, we'll be around to answer those. Also, our contact information for all of us on the panel are here, and I really appreciate all the thoughts that you have here on the panel. So thank you very much, Nimma, Norma, and John.
Thank you.
With that, I'd like to leave you with a parting thought, because this is something that has been inspirational to me. This is something I actually keep up on my wall when I'm writing my books or I'm trying to put an article out in Fast Company or something. This is written by Marianne Williamson, and it says, "Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, talented, and fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? Your playing small does not serve the world." Thank you very much.